Wooden boat's better in the water. It's got more insulation qualities. Fiberglass will freeze first. That'll be the first boats to freeze.
Here we all are on the Hudson River. Here we all are having a ball. It's depression time after all, and even more depressing for many in those days was Prohibition. And we'll see how some people kept up their spirits, both human and liquid. And we'll find out what it takes to put away a boat for the winter when we come back right here on the river. On the River is brought to you by Freihofer. That dates back 130 years on the river. He has a collection of home movies, most of them shot by his uncle William O'Reilly, now in his 80s and still alive in Kingston. And we have some still photographs, too, on the Rondout and on the Hudson.
The films that we have date into my generation from 1940 to 1946. My own involvement is from 1940 to 1954 when I worked on the shipyard myself.
Okay.
And so I can identify some of the characters that are in these films.
Okay, let's take a look now. What do we have here?
Well, that's the James F. Dwyer tugboat, which was originally built as a steam tug in about 1904. This is 1941, when it was outfitted with a diesel engine. And one of the unique things that was done is the pilot wheel was removed, kept in the pilot house as an emergency, but it went back to a hydraulic tiller steering with a lighting system that as you move the tiller would tell you the position of the rudder. And I can identify some of the characters in there. The man there is Mr. William Dwyer. That's my brother Jim Dwyer, who was later president of the Rondout National Bank here. Can't identify that fella. We're just on a cruise, going out to the lighthouse, turn around, make sure that all systems work. That's Matty Jordan, who's up in Golden Hill. There are several of these men still alive. That's my father, who's on Albany Avenue Nursing Home, James A. Dwyer.
And this is when now?
1941.
1941. On the Rondout Creek, this is.
We're out to the lighthouse at this point. Taking on a shakedown cruise because of the new diesel engine that was put in. That's one of the crew quarters. This tug, and there are some men living in town here that worked on her after World War II. Can't identify other than that's my father there. The man with his back to this is Mayor Edelmuth. Well, he became mayor in 1942.
How much did these ships weigh compared to today's?
I don't know. That was not a high horsepower tug. That was only 450 horsepower, and it was married up with one of our oil barges, and it generally ran the New York State Barge Canal, either the Lake Champlain or the Buffalo, pushing an oil barge. That's a landing craft from Island Dock that just passes there.
A landing craft for the war effort?
Yes.
LST?
LST,
yeah.
It was.
Peter says his grandfather, William F. Dwyer, was part owner of the R. Lenahan Company, which used to sit at the foot of Ravine Street in the 40s on the Rondout. Today, the Hideaway Marina is there.
And what they're doing is jacking down the barge onto the ways.
And this, if this were done today, you'd do it a lot more easily, I would guess, with bigger and better machinery.
It was all bull labor. There were about 98 men, 85 to 98 men working on that shipyard. Now, these were sawed away. There were 3 or 4 of these, and they had to count cadence because they all had to break up within seconds of the other. And that's what released the ship, or the barge. And I can remember one time during World War II, we couldn't get the grease we wanted, and we got lard from Force Foremost, and it had bone marrow in it. And the boat only moved a couple feet and never went that day. Had to jack it all up and change the waves under it. But this was always party day after the launching. That is probably me there with the shirt off.
You don't know, huh?
Well, you turn around, I was like 10 years old about that time. You see all those hoists, they were all driven by air. Most of the machinery on that yard was driven by air. There was one large Ingersoll brand compressor and pipes underground and hoses that hooked up, and even the hoist. There was very little electrical motors there. That's one of my sisters. This is an M&J Tracy boat. And the Tracys came from Kingston, and my grandfather helped put them in business about the turn of the century. They wanted to be large coal operators for the Con Edison Company. That is the largest river barge ever launched in the Roundout Creek. And it was quite a job to stop it from taking out Island Dock on the other side.
There she blows.
That was about 40 feet wide and at least 120 feet long, and had, I think, 16-foot sides. This we're up by Callahan is, across from Feeney's. That is a canal boat. This other Dwyer boat with the high hoist on it is a covered lighter. The background there.
And how many of these a year were put out, do you know?
It would take about 3 months to build a barge like that. And we built 3 of those large ones for the M&J Tracy Company. In the heydays in the 1920s, before my time, they launched 1 every month for the building season. That in the background there is Island Dock, which was a large shipbuilder. In fact, in World War II, they built sub-chasers.
They're still in business now, though, aren't they? But not
Only the Myron owns them, and they make concrete blocks.
concrete blocks, right?
But that was a large shipyard.
And this is all along the Roundout.
Yeah, these were all built at the. Here's the other shots of the tugboat. These were all built up at the R. Lenahan Company, which was a Dwyer company.
How did the names for these boats come about?
Well, James F. Dwyer happened to be my grandfather, and it was named after him.
And how long was your family building these boats?
Well, my grandfather, with some other gentlemen, took control of that yard in 1903, had complete control a few years later. It closed down in '52 as an operating shipyard, became a yacht basin.
It puts up some kind of weight, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. How you figure out how much they weigh is how much water they displace. There's markings on the sides of the barge, how many feet. And we know how much a cubic foot of water weighs, so able to calculate the gross tonnage of that. That is a stone scow or a brick scow type, more of a stone scow with the sides on her. This is Bruce Winnie, who became Robert Hutton, the movie actor. This launching is up next to Feeney's. This is the Christie Yard. Robert Hutton is alive and well, reasonably well, up at Golden Hill.
And he's from this area.
He was born here. Family had a store here. It was before he went into acting. His name was Bruce Winnie. There were 5 shipyards here prior to World War II. The first one that closed down was the one of that last movie, the Christie Yard. Things weren't that great. Christie had gone 3 years to West Point, got himself a colonelcy, went in on the African invasion, and mortgaged everything he had in New York and got all the mineral rights to Liberia for iron ore. Came back and made a deal with Republic Steel and became a multimillionaire and never went back in the scow business again. The yards that existed up through the 1950s were the Hildebrand Dry Dock Company, which is over in Connolly, which built some great minesweepers. I happened to work on them myself.
In Connolly, they built minesweepers.
Yes, and these were anywhere from about 90 to 170 foot long. But the interesting thing, they were the last great wooden boats built. Steam wooden ribs, triple lap with wood, and then lead sheeted. And they're, in fact, we gave them away to NATO nations, and Haile Selassie immediately made a yacht out of one. But a wooden boat in salt water in 50 years is just the beginning of its life, as opposed to a steel boat which will oxidize on the inside and rust out.
We're ready for another launching, it looks like. This became a big civil event?
Well, you
social event?
You had a party afterwards.
When did this generally take place, on a weekend, or did it?
No, but on high tide.
High tide.
In fact, those bigger ones we had to launch at middle tide. They were so big that they would have hit the dock so badly. So normally like to launch at high tide, but some of these bigger ones were done at middle tide, and it was done as soon as possible because you couldn't get paid till it was in the water. And if you're building a $30,000 barge, which they were at least at 30 or 40,000. Now you're talking hundreds of thousands, but.
And what is this ceremony?
Oh, this is the christening. The bottle of, we didn't really use champagne. We kept the champagne aside and put Canada Dry in the knit stocking. And these were christened by various members of the family.
And there she goes.
Cape Mahoney, the Tracy boats were all named Cape this, Cape that. All right, this is the last barge that was launched, and this was 1946. That's the John H. Dwyer. It was named for my uncle returning from World War II. Last new construction now. That's John H. Dwyer walking in there. There's some people from New York. John Dwyer was 43 in 1943 when he went into service, so he was 46 coming back. He served in Iceland, England, and on D-Day 2. And then he was in the Port of Le Havre after they got the beach settled down.
Were any of the boats made here used in the war effort?
Well, we built knockdown barges for the African invasion. That's the Margaret B. That was a yacht that we picked up from the Coast Guard in 1944 for the unbelievable sum of $600. And turned out it had putty in the block, so within a year we had to put a new engine in it, but had many parties on that down at the old regattas down in Poughkeepsie. Have a bunch of Vassar, Bennett girls. And of course we'd take them back to school and we'd sleep on the yacht. This is shot looking down towards the yard and over the island dock.
I noticed today these ships are mostly steel.
Yeah, well, that's because of repair time, particularly. A wooden boat will outlast a steel boat, but when they have a damage, you have to tear back so much to repair them, where with a steel boat, you just put a patch in. And really, at the end of World War II, the cost of building either was about the same in new construction. But the repair time when you have a damage.
Now let's take a look at some of those goings-on in the 1930s when alcoholic beverages were very illegal.
All right, this was a brick scow that a house was built on during Prohibition time as a club. And the club was known as the IJBs, which stood for the Irish, the Jews, and the Benny Waters, included anybody that wasn't Irish or Jewish. These men are businessmen that are down after hours putting this barge together. And my grandfather was never sure he was paid for the material, but my uncle swore that every nail was paid for. This became a party boat. It was originally tied up over in Port Yune for several years. It was tied up in Eddyville, as we'll see on one of the parties. It made its graveyard where the showboat is up in Eddyville today. It was damaged in an ice storm in 1936 or 38, and the club disbanded as far as using that. Of course, Prohibition had gone over, so they didn't need it for what they built it for originally.
So the original reason for this was, let's go someplace where we can party,
gamble,
and we're not going to be raided.
That's right.
Unexpectedly, anyway. You'd have to see a bunch of boats coming up. And what did they call this? Was it
the Ark?
Just the Ark.
Yeah.
Is this being taken out for its maiden voyage?
That's right, being towed to where it's going to be tied up over in Port Union. And that's the Rob. Now, I think that was a Cornell tub. I don't think that was one of the Dwyer launches.
And how many people would this hold? Quite
Oh,
a few.
Oh, 100 or more, sure.
Out on the Ark in the 1930s, the IJBs had some fun outings, and it seemed everyone was a chef.
There's only a few people still alive that are in this photograph, and one of them is Mr. William O'Reilly, who shot these photographs.
Guess it didn't take much to get these parties going, did it? How often would they go out, do you know?
Well, the big annual clam bake was once a year. Now, they partied every week on it, but the big to-do like this was once a year. And there are films there for the next 6 years. You think you're at the same party.
Were these clams that came out of the Hudson?
No, Long Island.
Bigger bills in those days.
Yeah, well, that's before the banking holiday.
Yeah. And the waiters were also members?
Oh, all members.
Yeah.
All members. Volunteer project.
Now, what are we going to see here, though?
You're going to see a lot of ice coming over the Eddyville Falls, which is going to damage the Ark. It's all ice.
And this is the Eddyville Falls?
This is right below the Eddyville Falls, where the Catch-22 restaurant is today.
Uh-huh.
It's right there. That ice storm led to the demise of the Ark and the IJBs.
The whole group just disbanded?
Well, they had a reunion at the Governor Clinton Hotel in 1940, but I guess all the men started raising families or something.
Part of Peter's collection includes still photographs, which also date way back.
This is shot down on West Strand, which is the coal docks in the railroad's time. Across here was Island Dock, which was originally a coal terminal for the D&H Canal. The taller man here is John D. Schoonmaker Sr., who had been president of the Knickerbocker Ice Company out of New York, which maintained a large ice house in Slatesburg. He went on to found the Island Dock Corporation and was later continued in World War II by his son. They built military Navy vessels during World War I and World War II. The shorter gentleman is my grandfather, James F. Dwyer. This is my grandfather, James Dwyer, in his 80th year, about 1940. This is the Dwyer brothers, of which three of them are still alive. This is taken about 1918. Yes, it's dated 1918. This was a central sawmill, and it had the carriage saw in there that could take a log 40 foot long and take a tree and turn it into a piece of timber. Here's another shot. This hopper here drew sawdust off all of the power saws that were in the mill. This is another shot of construction. That covered barge there is a lighter, and we built a lot of those for the New York Central Railroad. We had a lot of them our own in New York City. The railroad would contract you out as charter when they couldn't take care of their own business themselves. Another working shot, all the scaffolding after a barge was launched.
It's still magic photography, as it allows us to look back and see life as it was. And thanks to Peter Dwyer, we were able to view his collection of films and photographs from the days spent on the river.
Get phone calls, people saying, "Do I have a story for you?"
Fryhoffers has been serving the Hudson Valley for 25 years, and we're pleased to bring On the River into your home every Sunday on Channel 62.
Brian, as a veteran journalist, what do you find challenging about producing on the river?
Well, Bob, every week we try to be informative, we try to be educational, we want to be newsworthy if at all possible, and in some cases we even try to mix in a little entertainment value, and trying to put all of that together is the challenge, but I think we're making it happen.
Freihoffers began serving the river back in 1913, and we're pleased to present this Hudson River series every week.
With the cold weather upon us already, boat owners have prepared for the winter.